Believe it or not, this guy actually has friends.
Nice.
This is Scotty G and Friends on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Let's talk a little Mammoth. You might be turning into a basket case trying to figure out how you beat Minnesota and then follow it up with a 4-0 loss to the Blackhawks. Cole Bagley, NHL and Mammoth Insider, joining us from KSLSports.com. So, Cole, make this make sense to me. How did that happen?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to, the Mammoth approach, what their mindset is. I was able to talk with a couple of the guys, obviously, after the game and then today as well in D.C. ahead of their matchup with the Capitals. And, pretty much the consistent answer is, look, that's not who we are. We didn't approach that game the right way. And, we want to be the team that, beat Minnesota in the manner that they did, as opposed to, losing to Colorado and then, of course, losing 4-0 to Chicago. That's just an unacceptable result. And that's something that Coach Torney had talked about in his post-game press conferences. They fully understand, how serious this stretch of hockey is, how good they need to be, how locked in they are. And, based on what, I've seen and the conversations that I've had with those guys over the last couple of days, I would expect a much better effort against Washington tonight.
There's always, look, we all have bad days at the office. It just happens. It happens to the best of us. Does it have that kind of vibe to it, or is there a concern that there might be a lingering effect to it?
Yeah, I think it was just more of a bad day at the office. And, with Cooley and Kerfoot recently coming back, obviously you're going to take those players every time that they're healthy, right? It's not an issue, but it presents a challenge, I think, in the aspect of, making sure that they're coming back into the lineup in the right position. Cooley missed, 2 months. Kerfoot has only played about 10 or 11 games this season. And so, when you bring two guys like that back after you had played so well without them, I think it takes an adjustment. That's what we saw today at morning skate is they had, switched up some of the lines. Torney said he's looking for a spark. He didn't love how the lines had performed, over the, out of, 2 out of the last 3 games. And so we've seen Gunther jump up to the top line with Keller and Schmaltz. Cooley's now playing with Peterka and Krause, and then McMahon dropped to that third line. So, yeah, I think it takes some time not only to come back from a break like the Olympics, but when you have 2 high-impact players coming back, you got to play your cards right. You got to make sure that the lines are, firing on all cylinders.
This was to be expected to a certain extent, correct? That there would be a little bit of a learning curve getting those guys back in the lineup, and there probably should be an amount of patience given to this team to try to figure that out. But the problem is you're also in a playoff push too, and every 2 points are important. So I get both sides of that, and I understand that you want to be playing your best hockey, and that involves Kerfoot and Cooley, but also understanding that it's going to take a bit to get these guys where they need to be.
Yeah, it definitely is. The overlying message today was just understanding what it's taken for the Mammoth to get to this point. Going back 5 years to their original rebuild in Arizona, there's been a lot of sacrifice. There's been a lot of, difficult times, a lot of bumps and bruises along the way, a lot of learning curves, a lot of, bad moments. But now they're in a position, the best position they've been in half a decade, right? They have an opportunity in that first wild card spot, obviously to stay there, to win, enough games down the stretch to get in and then to make some noise in the first round of the playoffs. I mean, I'm looking at the standings right now, and I think that, if Utah is matched up against a Vegas Golden Knights or an Anaheim Ducks or Seattle Kraken, that's a series that Utah could definitely win. That's a series that they could push 6-7 games and, potentially come out of and enter that second round. So, just like we saw a year ago, as they continue to push through this rebuild, there's always going to be learning moments along the way. There's still a lot of young players on this team, and I would expect that, through these last 21, 22 games, it's not going to be the prettiest stretch of hockey. They're still learning not only how to play meaningful games, but how to play those meaningful games and win. Now, that's not to say that they can't get the job done, but I don't expect them to just cruise right into the playoffs.
When you look at this team and where they're at and what they're trying to build, are they on schedule for where you thought they'd be a year and a half ago when this team came to Salt Lake?
Yeah, definitely. Again, if you look back over the last 5 years, they've taken jumps every single season, right? They've jumped, anywhere from 7 to 10 points consistently year over year. Guys like Cooley and Gunther and what have you continue to improve their games and take, significant steps forward in terms of production and their impact. Guys like Clayton Keller and Nick Schmaltz have definitely stepped up their games. I think other players are learning different roles. I mean, a guy like Mikhail Sergachev, he didn't have to really be a leader in Tampa. He wasn't a guy that, was super overly relied on in terms of, kind of leading the charge, but he's been asked to do that. And I know that, his point production isn't quite where some had hoped. And, occasionally he does make some mistakes, but he's a guy that's playing a lot of minutes and is accepting a different role. So, yeah, I think if you look at, their progress year over year, the fact that, coming back from the break with 21, 22 games to go, that they're in the driver's seat, they control their own destiny. That's what Keller told me today is, hey, if you look at previous years, not that it was impossible, but it was a lot more difficult to get into the playoffs than what we have ahead of us. So, he's fully confident in their group. He's excited to get back at it tonight, and they're looking to, take advantage of this 5-game road trip.
All right, Cole, I'm going to give you a chance to brag a little bit and pretend, and you can make up whatever you thought in the past and tell it like it was actually the truth. But did you anticipate? There were a lot of people that were a little cranky about the build-out of that Olympic team and thought that there wasn't enough offense, there wasn't enough firepower, that they were just solely built to take on the Canadians. Obviously, they win gold. Take me back to before the Olympics. Were you a proponent of how they built that team? Because obviously it paid off.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were overall, at the end of the day, they got the job done, right? First gold medal in nearly half a century.
Yeah.
There were some aspects of it that I agreed with. I looked at who they chose as captain in Austin Matthews, and don't get me wrong, phenomenal player, arguably the best American player in the game today. Going to go down as one of the greatest American players of all time. But I thought his leadership skills were a little bit lacking, and but it doesn't matter what I think now. He got the job done. Did he have an extraordinary tournament? No, he didn't. But he played the game the right way and helped his team win. I think the other piece that a lot of people were questioning was kind of the last few guys to make the team. The JT Millers, the Vincent Trocheks, the Clayton Kellers, and what have you. And yeah, the one area that I kind of disagreed with was adding a guy like JT Miller, but as Bill Guerin, the general manager of both the Minnesota Wild and USA Hockey, had explained, is they were looking to build a hockey team. Obviously, any team that they constructed was going to be an all-star level team, but it wasn't all about firepower. It was about making sure that it was well balanced, that it was a team that could play a very well-balanced game from offense to defense to special teams, and that's what happened, right? They didn't give up a single goal on the PK. They were 100%. I'm not entirely certain how many penalties that they killed, but that is an unbelievable number, especially considering that they had a 5-on-3 to defend against Canada, and then a lot of those guys played key roles. I was able to speak with Brock Faber, one of the defensemen of the United States, the other day when he was in town with Minnesota, and he had nothing but high praise for Clayton Keller. Kells, I think, only played about 18 minutes over the course of all the games that they were there. He suited up for the majority, but he sat on the bench quite a bit. But Faber said, look, that was definitely a challenge for him. He's a guy that's always been one of the best players, if not the best player in every team that he's been a part of. And so it shows kind of the character, I think, that all of those guys had, and understanding what their roles were, roles that were going to be different than what they were filling on their NHL teams. But at the end of the day, they got the job done. They brought home the gold medal, and, now Bill Guerin looks like a genius.
Yeah, he does. The other thing, too, that I think is interesting is that these are the moments where you can really build on a fan base, because there's so much excitement watching that game, and the broken tooth of Jack Hughes and withstanding all the haymakers that the Canadians were throwing and winning in overtime and everything that came along with it. I think this is a really golden opportunity, not just locally but nationally, for you to capture that excitement and turning them into NHL fans, because you can't script that any better than that took off. And that's the great thing about being around hockey over these last couple of years, and you've known this forever because you've always been a fan, but jumping into the deep end of the pool, you see great stuff like this all the time. Now, maybe not with your national team, but there are incredible individual moments that happen all the time in the NHL. If you just pay attention and watch it, that's what's been so great about learning this sport.
Yeah, I've talked about these comments quite a few times, but I think it just kind of embodies, the direction of USA Hockey. 1980 captain Mike Ruzioni, who was a big part of, the Olympics, USA's Olympic team over in Milan. He was jumping on the broadcast. He was talking to the guys. I think he was on Dylan Larkin's shoulders during one of their after parties after they had won gold. But heading into that game, USA Hockey posted this clip of Ruzioni talking about the fact that it was time for USA to win gold. He'd even said, look, what we accomplished in 1980 was great, but it's long in the past. And he said, I've got grandkids now, and it's time for my grandkids to know who their hockey heroes are. And today those heroes are going to be born. It's time for them to win the gold and get the job done. And yeah, I think that's just, that's what happened. Like you said, you couldn't have scripted that any better. You get, the return of the NHL to the Olympics, best on best, the two best squads in the world, Canada and the United States. USA a little bit of an underdog going into that game. Hellebuck's, stands on his head, the greatest goaltending performance I've ever seen in my entire life. Jack Hughes, breaks his tooth, scores the golden goal. And then just, I think the sense of pride, that those guys took in USA Hockey and playing for their country. I think that it sparked excitement and interest, across the country. And, I think the most exciting thing is, USA Hockey has kind of reached the top of the mountain. This is the pinnacle, but, it's only gonna go up from here as kids, both boys and girls, look up to the Jack Hughes, the Connor Hellebucks, the Hillary Knights, the Megan Kellers, and decide, hey, I want to play hockey. And so, it's a very, very exciting time to be a fan of the NHL, to be a fan of hockey, and I would anticipate that it's just going to continue to grow after what those boys and, of course, the women, what they're able to do.
Bill Armstrong's put the number at about 94, 95 points to get in the playoffs. Would you agree with that? Yeah,
that's usually the benchmark. Somewhere between 93 to 96 is usually the minimum that you have to have in order to get in. So for Utah, they're looking at about another 28 to 30 points.
Doable in your mind?
Oh, 100%. With they have 22 games left. Yeah, they played 60. So there's 22 games left. If they can win, 14 or 15 of those, or, maybe you're winning 10, 11, and then getting to overtime 3-4 times. It's definitely doable. It's a fairly favorable schedule, but, like we talked about before, they've got to come with the right mindset every single night, and clearly they're capable. You don't just beat a team like Minnesota the way that they did, because of some stroke of luck. You do it because you have the right pieces. You have the skill, but you have to approach the game the right way. And I think right now that's the learning curve for this team. Consistency is what this team has preached over these last 2 years. And that, the expectations just continue to rise in terms of consistency, right? Last season it was, can we play consistent enough to play meaningful games, to be in, to be in the race? Doesn't matter if we're at the bottom. Can we play consistent enough to be in the race? They accomplished that. Now it's advancing to that next stage of the rebuild of, can we play consistent enough to not only be in the race, but get ourselves into the playoffs to make a little bit of noise? So, the bar is raised, but, I think the guys are up for it. And, the runway is clear. They just have to, turn on the engines and, make sure that they take off here and start winning some games on a more consistent basis.
Cole, appreciate your time. I know you're with the team in D.C. Should be a fun one tonight. How does it write the script? How does this play out?
Yeah, I would expect a battle. I mean, these are two teams. Utah is obviously in the top wild card spot in the Western Conference. Meanwhile, Washington in the East, they are 2 points out, 2 points behind the Boston Bruins for the second wild card spot in the Eastern Conference. So, these are two teams that understand that wins are precious, points are precious. They're anxious both to get it done. I think whoever plays with a little bit more passion on either side is who's going to come out on top. But I would anticipate a pretty closely contested contest as both of these teams need to make sure they get a win.
Awesome. Cole, appreciate it, man. You're the best. Thanks.
Thanks, Scotty.
There he is, Cole Bagley, NHL Mammoth Insider for KSLSports.com. I'm here in Las Vegas. Utah State will take on UNLV coming up later on tonight. We're going to step away. JJ and Alex are going to take over. Remember, they've got a shorter show with the Mammoth in action coming up tonight, so they'll get a little bit of a kickstart beginning coming up next. Remember, game tonight. Pregame will begin at 8:30. Tip-off is at 9 o'clock. Utah State and UNLV. And you'll hear it all right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.